Welcome to Shone's Thoughts, Afterhours. I guess if I were to label this in a sequential number, this would be episode 021. Although I haven't actually made 21 episodes of After Hours, honestly, it feels like I have. It's just most of them were audios that I either recorded to myself, to the air around me, or sometimes, just recorded them and then deleted them. So this definitely would be After Hours 121, actually, probably, if we were to maybe correctly give them numbers in chronological order. So welcome. Thank you for sharing your time and attention with me. And before I was starting to record this, I was thinking to myself, well, what else do I talk about? What other things can I talk? Because if you do look back at Candid Thoughts and Shone's Thoughts, or Candid Talks, it's actually probably better described as that was its real name. Anyways, from Candid Talks to Shone's Thoughts, the whole idea is to simply talk about whatever's coming to my mind, and I've had a lot of different topics flow through my mind. And, well, many of them have been related to healing, because I honestly am a huge advocate of self-healing, the belief that we can heal ourselves to a degree that is far beyond what we currently do. And maybe that's the reason why, because eventually I would even get to this conversation. And this conversation is definitely something that other people in our world, including friends and neighbors who work for corporations who would be affected by a divergence from our traditional medical system. There's a lot of people that make money off the stocks and jobs and, ad campaigns, silly ad campaigns that some of these companies make. And there would be a lot changed just by that one simple thing, to recognize that we as Homo sapiens, as beings of this planet, that we perhaps were like nature, given a majority of the tools to heal ourselves, and that healing starts within ourselves. The belief in ourselves, the confidence in ourselves, self-confidence essentially, and the knowledge. And that's an important key factor, because when we don't have knowledge, we're uncertain about what we can do, and therefore it's easier to give that power away rather than pertaining or procuring the knowledge for ourselves. And so for me, learning everything I did about self-healing has been a fundamental pillar in what I talk about on my channel, because I think it's very advantageous when we take upon it ourselves to do our own healing, to learn, and not simply to take what we've been shown or told by beings holding symbols or staffs or wands or stethoscopes, whatever you kind of wanted to use them as their tool. Harry Potter had his tool. But nonetheless, healing is an important part of what I like talking about on my channel. Actually, I have this one video that I took, just a normal podcast like I'm doing right now, and I had fun with that podcast. I added images on to keep the video semi-entertaining. And it was all about 14 plus, which of course was just 15. You always got to check the marketing. If something says something plus, it's generally one or two more, or depending on the thing. But anyways, I think it was 15. And I had fun with just kind of going through it and sharing it, but more importantly, reliving those moments in a sense as I listened to the podcast myself, which I've done maybe 2 or 3 times. It's entertaining and such. And as well, of course, when I created it, I spend a lot of time immersed within that. And that's the true blessings of creating, actually, is when you're in that mode of creating, you're in that feeling of creating. And if you're creating something that's beautiful, and most creations are beautiful, and when you're in that flow state or creative state, you're, in my opinion anyways, healing. You're raising or lifting your vibration and through your art, and your art in a sense is lifting you. It's pulling you up. Your creation is therefore helping you, because not only do you add by creating the art of whatever it is to your world, you also add, if you look on an energetic level, you're adding a higher amount of something of beauty, something of positiveness into the world, creating. And that's what, now that I think about it, that's what creating is it's adding to. It's maybe even bringing energy in, because you're bringing creation, you're creating something, so therefore that energy has to, or that creation has to come from an energy. So anyways, yeah, I don't know if you go with me what I'm thinking about that, but yeah, I'm just having all these ideas floating through my mind. But nonetheless, when you do create, you heal, you release, you let go, you lift vibration. And even if you don't heal yourself per se, you might be able to lift someone else, share that ripple, share that life-moving moment. So you create something and someone else is affected by that creation, and it lifts them somehow. That's like you contributing. So just if you create, you continue to create, eventually it inspires someone else to perhaps create for themselves. And then, as I said, that all heals. And that's essentially why most of my podcast is centered around healing and my own personal healing journey, sharing stories like the story that I had when I was swimming in the Lijiang River, the Yellow River in China, and my story and my experience there. Because, there's that saying that what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And there is so much truth in that, because as we overcome all the obstacles, we become stronger, in a sense, giving ourselves permission to believe ourselves stronger, wiser, more able. Everything, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but everything has its steps leading up to where you want to be. And once again, even that goes back to healing. Because if we're wanting to live in a far better world, we have to, or not have to, but ought to, or perhaps we could, just maybe, release a lot of the things in our life that no longer serve us. The routines, the materialism, the massive amount of cars that are in roads and parking lots everywhere, causing so much traffic. The idea that there needs to be such a big governance or government over us, perhaps, that maybe we can look at minimizing the government as much as we can while still maintaining, the same level of community that we had. It'll shift things considerably when we start bringing back in manufacturing of whatever it is that we manufacture, bring it back into a local area where, we aren't shipping things such a far distance any longer. And we're bringing it back so the local people that live there are the ones that can benefit. Because there's reduced shipping costs, reduced advertising costs, reduced so many different costs, and reduce the cost of paying CEOs and corporate executives big amounts of money, bring that all right back down to the local provider, and which is local manufacturing, creating things in small quantities so the cost of the overhead isn't crazy, and you sell them locally so you don't have to add the shipping and advertising and management costs on top of getting that product from a factory. And you do it locally so you don't need giant factories that pollute. You can have smaller, easily contained production areas that you can, work with nature considerably better. Imagine a house that's, I'm just imagining right now a house that would be nicely in the middle of the forest, where that person that lives there is going out and they're collecting all these different stuff from nature and making essential oils, and then taking those oils once a week to go to the local market where she sells them in her own booth and makes the money or the resources she needs in order to sustain the next month of her life. And there's a lot of people that could do that all over the place, and therefore people would, be able to support themselves. And of course, that didn't mean that if you wanted to go to Africa and buy essential oils from there, you could, that there would be a perhaps shipping structure in order to ship things all over the world. And now that's beginning to sound like the marketplace that is and was talked about on the Global Intelligence Agency reports, or more importantly, I guess they were talked about on the situation reports. But anyways, so where do we go? Well, we get back to healing. A super important thing. And, if we look back to what was talked about 2,000 years ago, you could have kind of looked at things like the message was healing is important and healing is possible, and that it's possible to change matter based on thought, water into wine. And that perhaps the message or the code which was locked within all that is that we do have that ability. So by remembering perhaps what Jesus was able to do, maybe that's perhaps our image or our idea that we could do that too. You go back into that story about the guy, or the fact that up until a certain point in time, the 5-minute mile wasn't possible. And then eventually it was, and then it was for a lot of people. Maybe that's what that seed is, giving us that one example of what was possible, and therefore building on it and taking over 2,000 years for that seed to germinate, to build upon it so that we were able to even get any more. And, I don't necessarily know how many there were, in fact, in between now and then, but yeah. Yet to get there requires healing. Healing of what continues to go on even right now. Healing is, at least for me, with what's happening in the world, all over the world, is recognizing what's happening all over the world and the rest of the world that's not my direct world is something that those people either A, have to go through in order to become stronger, or B, it's not really happening. Of course, there's a lot more that's being said to have happened than maybe has happened. Who knows? There's been a lot of mistrust in mainstream media and even alternative media about what's truly happening in the world. So it's kind of hard just to look at anything, assume that that's the way it is, but yet when you look out there, you do definitely see a transformation. And I kind of see that as an opportunity to start pondering outside the lines. That's funny, pondering outside the lines. There's so much humor in there. A little bit toilet humor, I know, I understand, but yeah, maybe that's what we need to do. And to start unifying. Like I get it. I understand. Even for myself, it's taken me a while to come out and be able to stand in front of the camera directly. It's taken me a little time to get back out there, you could kind of say, and start standing in front of the camera, standing in front of it and facing it. And so it definitely does take time, especially when we've considered all that has happened. But yet, as we start to perhaps move back to that disclosure direction and truthful direction, there's going to be a lot of work to do. And once again, it all comes back to healing. So, question is, are we ready to heal? And before you say, oh, I'm already healed, I'm more so talking about if we're not all back together, living in a world that we would prefer, then we're not fully healed. And this is a journey of healing. And so one person saying, yeah, I'm all healed, and then looking around and there's no one around them that's, part of the one. And the one being all Homo sapiens, all life, really. If we're not there yet, then of course there's something to be done. There's that part on the Paul Selig book, chapter 5, I believe, that talks about the boulders. And it talks about a cave entrance, the area that you want to go. And there being a boulder in the doorway, yet to go through it, to go through the cave, to go through that experience, you need to remove that boulder. But once you remove that boulder, it's going to allow gas and smell and, bats and all this stuff to come swarming out. But you have to go through that experience. You have to go through, that's going to be part of the experience you go through. So you had to move that boulder knowing that experience would happen. And when it does, the stronger awareness you have and be able to move through it and recognize it as a lesson or a test or a challenge or a strengthening exercise, forging by fire, however challenging it was, unless you can see it as that, you might have to go through it a couple times. Yet, I don't know, I guess we're going back to healing again. Because when you heal, anyways, I just feel that I'm getting quite circular on what I'm saying. So I'm going to leave these after hours thoughts with you. And, I get it though. That's really what I was trying to go for, is I get the challenging times it's taking, but if we want to have that world that we would prefer to live in, we need to start doing things that we didn't do before. And for me, that was standing in front of a camera, although, a long time ago I was told, do a podcast about possibilities and write a book about it. That's in progress more now than it ever was before. You can find a playlist, which I'll put at the end of this, because that is, I think, a very powerfully healing technique to use, as what I've done in the podcast possibilities. Anyways, I was guided to do a podcast and a book on possibilities, and also to do the illuminating language and the I Foresee videos. And I felt really in line with the energy that I was able to sit in, the love energy that I was able to sit in, the thoughts that I was able to sit in, the imagination, like imagining different loving sequences and being within that energy in my mind. And when I created those things, that was a really amazing state to stand in. And so I truly do believe that for me personally, and I guess this sums up the whole thing, creating all of that stuff really, really helped me in my own healing process. And, if we had more time, perhaps as a community in order to promote more healing activities, we could possibly make healing much more obtainable and therefore release the anger and all this programming that we have had. Just a thought. Anyways, bye.